Welcome to Tash Talks Soul. Hi and welcome back. To be honest, I don't actually know what I'm going to talk about in this episode, but I feel like there's a few points that I'd like to get out and just have a chat about. So let's see where we end up. I wanted to talk about sometimes in life we go through situations with other people where there is huge opportunity for growth. And I know we've talked about twin flames and karmic relationships and how tumultuous they can be, but I've been kind of dwelling on that and mulling it over and linking it back to the first episode where I talked about the importance of therapy and counselling for your spiritual growth. I think I'm changing my perspective to think that we can choose to evolve, to handle the challenges in our lives with a lot more grace and a lot more love, I think is the word. And where you can be facing challenging situations with other people, but you don't have to descend into chaos and conflict and this tumultuous roller coaster. You could come at it from a more emotionally intelligent place. You can make conscious decisions to look at the big picture. You can make conscious decisions to work on your triggers and handle situations respectfully, politely, with love. Things don't have to descend into absolute rubbish. Because why should they have to? Just because someone's a karmic relationship, you might have unfinished business from past lives, and the lesson in this life is to close that cycle, to look at that situation and see it for what it is, get the lessons from it, and then respectfully let it go. It doesn't have to be an absolute, circus. Who says it does? I mean, if we're operating from a place of deep wounding and hurt, and maybe we haven't yet had the opportunity to do a lot of introspection or growth or healing, then these things can deteriorate, for sure. I mean, it doesn't matter how healed you are, things can still deteriorate. We're all human. Nobody is perfectly healed or, perfectly got everything together all the time. I mean, throw in lack of sleep, maybe you're not feeling well, maybe, Mercury's in retrograde, who knows? There's always going to be reasons why we're not on top of our game. And that's okay to have moments that we're not proud of, as long as you then take accountability for yourself and say, wow, okay, the way I acted and the way I spoke, that is not in alignment with where I'm trying to go. Let's try and get on top of that, but also while holding space for ourselves, not to be too judgmental or critical of the way that we did handle it. And so I think that in the example of karmic relationships, it's so important to take a step back and really assess what lessons we're being taught. I think a lot of the time we let our brains get in the way and we try to overlay this intellectual, mental layer on top of what we're feeling. And then our soul feels stifled because it knows that there's lessons to learn there, but we're just not seeing them. We're not grasping why we're here. All we know is that we're feeling kind of numb, kind of flat, kind of champing at the bit in the sense of, it's not for you, but you can't quite put your finger on why, what's going on with this situation. And with karmics, it's in the past life, somebody may have hurt you. Like there's an example I read about where in a past life, two souls, one was a son, one was a mother. And the son was in a position of authority within a community, and the mother had, I think, stolen something or done something that went against the community standards, the rules, the expectations. And so the punishment for that was execution. And the son made a point to show it doesn't matter who you are, this is my own mother, and I am still going to execute her because the rules apply to everybody. And so he did. Fast forward into a future life, present life, and these two souls were back together, and their relationship was strained. And in this life, the son was experiencing recurring feelings of abandonment by his mother. She abandoned him at birth, and then I think they later reconnected, and the relationship was a disappointment, and that was a recurring lesson, this lesson of abandonment, and he could not understand why. And doing, these past life regressions, it turned out to be a karmic cycle of his soul had hurt somebody, and then the soul wanted to understand what it would be like to be on the receiving end, and so it recreated that cycle with the roles switched in this life so that he could understand the depth of the betrayal that the soul that was his mother felt. Because in this life, the mother was betraying him, abandoning him. And so I think it's important to look at, maybe difficult situations in your life or unfulfilling connections and see, could there be a bigger picture? Could this have played out in a past life where things were done, and now I am learning these lessons, and am I even seeing these lessons correctly? I think sometimes when we have low self-worth and low, maybe, I wouldn't say emotional intelligence, but maybe you're not quite down the spiritual path, or maybe you have a belief that life is just chaos and whatever happens, there's no greater meaning to any of it. You might find yourself feeling frustrated and not seeing the situation that's in front of you. But I think if we look at it closely, I think there can be lessons that can be identified. And I'll do a separate episode on the types of lessons that souls want to incarnate to learn. I've got notes on this already, so maybe I'll record that sooner rather than later. But I think if we look at it and see, are we repeating patterns? Is there a pattern to this? Is this a cycle? Is my soul, is my inner voice, is my intuition telling me that something here is amiss? Something's not right. I just can't put my finger on it. Meditate on that feeling. Delve into it. Are you being loved properly? Are you even being respected? Are you being silenced? Are you being given the gift of, autonomy and authenticity, the freedom to be yourself without fear of masking yourself and silencing yourself in order to avoid repercussions? I know I've had that particular lesson, which is why I bring it up, because I just accepted, with multiple people in my life, situations where I would silence myself and mask myself, and it was that fear of being vulnerable and seen for fear of consequences. It's like I will lose that person's love if I actually use my voice and stand up for myself. But the reality is that, that wasn't love in the first place then. That was attachment, and that was codependency. Maybe it was enmeshment, whatever it might be, but that's not love. If somebody loves you, they're going to accept you. They might call you out on crappy behavior. Loving someone doesn't mean that you're just automatically here for all of the BS. Gently call them out on where they might be dropping the ball or where they can improve. But, I really found I had to sit and analyze my relationships, and even thinking, I've done this healing. I'm using my voice. I'm authentic. I hold my boundaries. This has been such a journey. And then I'll find myself in another situation where somebody might be exerting the influence on me or wanting things from me and expecting things, and I still don't speak up, and I still go along with it. And even though inside of me that's a misalignment, there's it's not what I want to be doing. And when you've had a lifetime with somebody that is used to having a certain dynamic with you, if you've had decades with somebody that is used to a particular status quo, it can be really difficult to shift out of those patterns or even to see them, because that is just when a person is like your arm or your leg, somebody, that's been with you your entire life, it can be really difficult to recognize things as unhealthy and to introduce new boundaries and then to maintain them, because often that does upset the other person. But ask yourself this: are you just a convenience to that other person? Are you just a projection of their needs that's ticking a box? What is your role in their life? Or are you seen and valued as an individual, who you are in your soul, what you energetically, as your own creation in your whole right, bring to the table? Because if somebody views you in that way, I promise you they're not going to be put off by the change in dynamic. They will see what you're doing. They will recognize that you're going through growth, and they will find a way to pivot and change and accept you in this new iteration of who you're becoming. But if somebody is, it's just an attachment and it's all about what you can do for them and what they can get from you, and not really about your needs, and you having needs is just not, be better if you didn't, because that just makes their life more difficult, then that's, a dynamic that you need to look at. I found for myself in a couple of situations actually, where I have had to turn inwards, assess, and say, you know what, this dynamic is not working for me anymore. This isn't who I am. I need to speak up. I need to set boundaries. I need to gently change things. And, in some of my relationships, or one particular I can think of, I'm a little bit more aggressive in how I communicate my needs, because it's a dynamic of me feeling like I have to have walls up and defend myself and almost be on the counter all the time. So I've been working on diffusing that kind of battle ready attitude and just trying to, just remove myself and take a time out and pause before falling back into that dynamic. But in the other handful of relationships I have in my life where I have had to set boundaries and change the dynamic in order for it to be more mutually fulfilling from my perspective, it's been a really slow, really gentle process. It hasn't been this aggressive, get on board or get out, my way or the highway kind of dynamic. It's been really gentle, slow conversations around, look, this doesn't feel good to me. Or changing, sometimes not even having a direct conversation, but just communicating with people subtly that I will no longer entertain these types of conversations. This no longer works for me. I am wanting, the outcome that I'm wanting is a positive, loving, mutually fulfilling relationship, and anything that's not in alignment with that falls by the wayside. And in my life, the people I've done that with, nobody, the people that have been in my life for decades, nobody's turned around and said, I don't love you anymore, you can get out. Pack your bags, get out. I don't like this new you. Everybody's turned around and said, some said with words, others not with words, but it's like, okay, this is a shift. I don't know how I feel about this, but I'm willing to work with you because having you in my life is important to me. And so I think we can gently coach and guide our relationships towards a place that's more mutually fulfilling, more aligned, more full of love and gratitude and joy for each other, without it needing to become this big epic battle. And I think part of that is working through our triggers and working on our shadow and making ourselves the best version of ourselves in order to be able to hold space for this transformation. Because if we're coming from a wounded place of taking everything personally, getting upset, getting triggered, communicating our needs aggressively, or even worse, well, I don't know what's worse, but not communicating our needs, expecting the other person to be psychic, being passive aggressive, and then it becomes, rather than gently but assertively asking for your needs to be met, you turn to games of being passive aggressive and manipulation, thinking that if you can just manipulate the outside environment, then you'll get the behavior that you desire from the other person, which is a trauma response from children that maybe didn't feel safe to voice their needs for whatever reason as a child, and the only way that they could get their needs met was through manipulation. Those children grow into adults that feel like the only way that they can get what they want is by playing games and manipulating and being passive aggressive and manipulating situations to get the desired outcome, rather than just being vulnerable and open and putting your heart on your sleeve and saying, look, this is the situation, it doesn't work for me. This is what my needs are. Do you think we can work together to meet them? And that's not going to be possible in every relationship. I have not been successful at doing this in every relationship I have. Some I have, others I haven't, and others are still a work in progress. And it's all a journey. And I hope that whatever I've said today has resonated or made sense in some way. I know this was a bit of an unstructured, free-flowing kind of riff, but let me know what you thought, and I hope you have a lovely day. Bye.